Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and the good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course, you good old boys from Canada. You know we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. Thank you for following Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network. We love you in Canada, but there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south. In the land of the free, in the home of the brave. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys on January 16th, 2018, Big C?
Well, Charlton, I'm recovering from, I think, a little pig-itis and stuff. When they revolved that pig from down the street, the pig farm, I think they may have put something in them that, had an expiration date on it. And it left me a little bit under the weather and then giving some of it back to Mother Nature, after I ate it.
You know what's funny? A lot of you Southern people, you eat healthy food right out of the fields. But when you start eating that processed stuff that we good old boys in California eat, it has MSG and all kind of preservatives in it, Big C. Maybe your stomach's not used to preservatives, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it wasn't used to whatever was in that puppy. It didn't taste too well for the next couple of days, Charlton. It allowed me to enjoy some exciting football over the weekend, but it wasn't too exciting in the aftermath.
Yeah, that is something else. I do want to say today's a beautiful day in the world of sports. And we love sports and politics because it all goes together in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I do want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So, Big C, we've been through a lot of things in the world of sports and had some great football games over the weekend, and we'll talk about that again and how it all shapes up for what should be a dynamic championship weekend. But I'd be remiss if I didn't go into a little bit of talk about, some of the rumblings out there. And we know as African Americans, we just had Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and I wanted to get your thoughts on what that means, because it's going to lead into what I'm going to talk about today, Big C. A lot of people kind of have slippery thoughts. But Dr. King, you being in the South, and we have a great country, United States of America, but it's not always easy to be free. It's not easy to be free to vote. It's not easy to be free to live where you want to live. And we know it's not free to have freedom of thought, because sometimes when you exercise that, you get ridiculed. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you talk about equality in America. You have to look at these southern states.
Yeah.
They still operate under Jim Crow law down here in these southern states. So when you think about equality in America, it really doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's a southern part of the United States that still operates under Jim Crow, and all you people have a little Google button on your phone or your computer at home and look up Jim Crow. What does that stand for?
Yeah.
Let me give you the essence of it. I know they fight about wages, and Trump is talking about wage increase in America, that everybody's going to see a huge wage increase in their checks over the next several months, over the next several years.
Yeah.
Jim Crow means when you work in a service industry job. In service industry, a lot of America works in service industry. That means you work in a tip basis. If you work in a tip basis job in a Jim Crow state, which there are still 11 of them in the United States, there are 11 Jim Crow states, that they can pay you as little as $2.30 an hour, and that's legal.
Wow.
And they say you have to make up the rest on tips.
Yeah.
So you think about it. If you're living in Los Angeles, you're living in Seattle, you're living in New York, you're living in Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, you live in Minot, North Dakota, okay?
Yeah.
And they say that they can pay you $2.30 an hour, and you have to make the rest up on the tips. Say you're in Dakota, Charlton, and there's a snowstorm, okay?
Yeah.
And the town is shut down for a couple of days, and so nobody can come into the diner that you're working in.
Yeah.
So how do you make up the rest in tips when you've been closed for 2 days?
Yeah.
You got to go to work, but nobody can come in and buy the goods. So you have to survive on that $2.30 because the owner of the establishment will not make it up.
Yeah.
And if you look at the northeast corner going on right now, talking from the southern part of the United States all the way up to the northeast, where they're talking about a snow warning. Matter of fact, Dallas, Texas was closed down today.
Oh, really?
Because of snow. And so those waitresses and waiters in Dallas that are not serving people for breakfast, lunch, and dinner at those establishments, Charlton, that could not get in, even though those workers made it to work.
Wow.
Would have had to survive on that Jim Crow wages of $2.30 an hour, Chauncey.
That's incredible.
So when we talk about equality, and we have the First Lady talking about this is a country of equality, and we're striving to make life better for everybody, and yet here's her husband talking about racist banter.
Yeah.
Talking about he wants to discriminate against Muslims. He wants to discriminate against Mexicans. And he wants to discriminate against Africans and Haitians. But she's saying this is a country of equality, and yet her husband is saying that he's the ultimate racist every day.
Yeah, that's a shame. We know when we talk about this DACA program and how they've taken people and want to send them back to, where the Europeans
this is the only country that knows.
Yeah.
Where you going to send them back to? The neighborhood that they live in?
Yeah.
You can't take kids and displace them. So what he's going to do is he's going to go displace all the Europeans and all the Asians that are here under that same auspices. He doesn't say to them, as long as they have the complexion that he has, he's not going to worry about it. But we have more Asians and we have more Europeans in this country illegally than we have DACA, the Hispanic children that are in this country. Yet he only targeted the one race, Charlie. That's it.
Yeah, and people don't even check when they come from Canada. We know that's part of life, and I just look at the backdrop of Dr. King, and you think about the Dr. King Memorial, and you think about everything that he stood for. Even though he got a lot of credit for the civil rights movement, it was Rosa Parks is the one who would not give up her seat in a Christian nation to a white man because we didn't have the same rights on the law. Under the law, we didn't have the same opportunities. And now...
Well, Charles, prior to Dr. King, there was a Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers lost his life. He was assassinated in his front yard in front of his family by Violent Dealer Beckworth. And he was acquitted twice of this murder, even though he admitted to doing it. He shot this man to death in his back, in his front yard. And he was leading the civil rights movement prior to Dr. King. Dr. King took over after Medgar Evers. But there were many civil rights leaders that did not get the publicity that Dr. King got, even though he sorely deserved it, Charlton. It's just that they were not orators like he was. They were not great speakers. But he commanded a presence with his voice. He was a small man of stature, only 5'7". But he stood 7 feet tall whenever he made an appearance because of the fear factor that the white Americans had of him. Because he spoke so eloquently and he never spoke with any negativity. He always spoke about equality and opportunity. And that's what hurts white America the most, is that when you talk about equality and opportunity, is that they think it's an ulterior motive. And all you want is your piece of the pie, Charles.
And that piece of the pie, you think about it and how, as African-American men, I love the fact that I think we're all from the same source. So all human beings came from the African continent. Anyone can Google that as well. But I look at the fact that we look at our show, Big C Sports. We look at all the other sports broadcasters all over the globe that do their sports no matter what country they're from, whether they're from Australia, whether they're from England, whether they're from China, whether they're from the United States of America, Canada. Everyone has a right to speak. That's all you really have, Big C, for the universe is that truth. So when you do speak, what comes out of it? And it goes back to Dr. King giving the I Have a Dream speech, and it meant that people can actually speak what their dreams were. Now, who's going to tell you what you can dream about, Big C? Nobody can do that. But something that a lot of African-American men and black men have had to deal with, and women too, over the years, is whenever you speak your truth, it doesn't have to mean that the whole world experiences that. But when we speak our truth, do you find that more people are chastised for speaking the truth that may be unpleasant to hear, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they are, Charlton, because it's something that cuts to the core of those people who are anti what you're speaking about, Charlton. Regardless of race and culture, if you're anti what somebody stands for, then you don't understand what they mean because they don't live in your neighborhood and you don't communicate with them every day, Charlton. Well, we have broadcasters on the huge networks that come on television every day. And they're African American, and they're blasting other African Americans.
That's a shame.
Why? It doesn't. I don't understand it. They've made their living off the backs of African Americans. They can say, well, I got this NBA player on the phone, or I talk with this NBA player.
Or my sources
so I have insight. You're my sources, okay? Because you've talked to another NBA African American player who has allowed you the opportunity to perpetuate your career. But yet you stab other African Americans in the back
Yep.
Because some African Americans give you an opportunity to speak, and you say "my brother" on the air. No, you're not somebody's brother.
Yeah.
You are that person who is employed by somebody.
Yep.
And I can go back to the movie Django, Charlton.
Yeah.
There was an individual who worked for a slave master. His name was Simon, played by Samuel L. Jackson.
Great actor.
And that's who this one particular broadcaster reminds me of.
Yeah.
It's Simon.
Yeah.
And he comes on every afternoon. And he works with a gentleman named Max Kellerman.
Yeah.
Max Kellerman to me is more black than what he is.
Yeah.
Max tells the truth.
Yeah.
But being a loudmouth, you think about being a loudmouth and blasting others, it makes you a better and appreciated person. Maybe to one set of society. I don't know why he's not working for Fox right now.
That's
what
next.
He sounds like. He sounds like he's an advocate for Fox the way he blasts African Americans. He doesn't even cover certain sports like football. He wants to blast Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Yet he would never go out and take the stance that Colin Kaepernick took from a societal perspective in trying to help other African Americans, Charlton.
That's a good point, and that's a thing. Even Dr. King, when Dr. King was out stumping and doing his speeches, Big C, trying to unite the whole country, and even outside of the United States of America, there were a lot of people that told him that it's too soon. Well, Dr. King, we don't want to overcome yet. We want to wait until the future. Let's go, 50 years into the future. We don't want to do it too soon. Even JFK didn't like Dr. King. He just he had to get on the bandwagon and try to pretend that he supported him, but he never really did. But I want to bring this point up to you, because in this diaspora of people all over the world, it's the black talent that has always been emulated all over the globe, Big C. And when I look at some of the broadcasters and personalities, when I see sometimes we're given more credit for turning against each other. There's sometimes if you're a really loudmouth person and you want to get on and talk and you're screaming and ranting as if that's the only conversation you can have, that person as a black man will get more play on a sports show than people who are intelligent, are erudite, or know how to have a conversation where they're not just yelling and screaming all the time. And I think you can do whatever you want to do. If that's who you are, that's who you are. But that seems to be more embraced by the mainstream society. Let's take this one angry black guy and make him be the voice of all black Americans, and then he tries to get in front of the athletes and say, I know this guy, and when he's not in front of the athletes, he's insulting the athlete. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, and that's the shame about it, Charlton. We've always had these house people, as they call them.
Yeah.
Who wants to rant and rave about everybody else.
Yeah, I've known some of those guys.
Wrong with him. He's always the good boy. But he wants to tell on everybody else what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
But he has a clean slate. He has a perfect slate.
Yeah.
And it wants to stand up and man up and say, look, I've been wrong about a lot of the things that I've slated.
Yeah.
Because I work for a particular network, and to keep my job, I have to blast my own people.
Yep.
And it's important to keep your job. I don't hate him for keeping his job, Charlton.
No.
But I just, his direction as far as he goes.
Yeah.
Which is unnecessary. You don't have to run over people.
No.
If you're a good enough talent,
yeah,
then you don't have to berate other people in your industry to keep on the air every day.
Let me ask you.
Go out and speak about the positivity of what people are doing every day. You have a problem in doing that. Yeah. And that's my problem with it.
And I understand, and that's why this is a great thing about our country, we can all agree and disagree. I want to bring you to this basketball, this great set of basketball games we had over the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Now, think about this. Dr. King was about peace and turning the other cheek, which it doesn't even make sense. If someone slaps you, you don't turn around, you slap them back. That's what law enforcement does. That's what the courts do. When you slap someone, what's the court do? The court punishes you. They don't say, well, let's turn the other cheek. If you slap somebody, a law enforcement's not going to say, well, let's turn the other cheek. If you go up and punch someone in the armed forces, in the Marines don't say, well, let's turn the other cheek. But that's what Dr. King had to do so you didn't get murdered by society. When black men fought back, you were oftentimes murdered. So that was his message to keep people alive. But I got to bring this point up to you. When you look at our society and how Dr. King had to always overcome, he had to overcome a society that said, we don't want you to have equal opportunity. We don't want you to have the pursuit of happiness and liberty and justice for all. We don't want you to have that. So whenever he spoke against it, remember, Colin Kaepernick, a lot of people say, well, he's a rebel riser and he disrespected the flag. He never disrespected the flag. But that's the same thing that Dr. King went through whenever you...
Charlton, tell me what disrespecting the flag is. Is that a president standing at a national championship football game who doesn't know the words to the national anthem? Is that disrespecting the flag? Or is that a vice president showing up for an NFL game, standing there just for the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever they did, the national anthem, and then walks out on the flag? That's more disrespectful to the flag and the American people than anything that somebody wants to rave on a former NFL quarterback who's standing for injustice, who took a knee for injustice, to bring attention to that, to sacrifice his career because of the injustice and unequitable society that we have in America. If more people did that, acknowledge what Colin Kaepernick took a knee for. No one wants to acknowledge that because then you have to tell the truth. So instead of telling the truth, as they say in the White House, I don't recall, let me just tell a lie. Let me just tell a lie. If I tell a lie and say that he's against the flag and the military, then maybe some of my base will believe me. But if I say he took a knee for social injustice in sports, in life, in education, then maybe people will think about what he's doing. But if I lie and say he's against the military and the flag, then they would say, okay, I can see that, but I can't recognize the other injustice.
And I want to bring this up to you because and Chris Paul and some other players down there in L.A. with the Clippers versus Houston last night, and they had some conversations on the floor, and you know what, back in the day, I think about guys like George Steinbrenner and a lot of the Yankees organization, Billy Martin, they always had conversation. Mike Ditka, he didn't even like his defensive coordinator when the Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl, and Buddy Ryan, he didn't like him. They had to separate those two guys on the sidelines.
Think about it. Kevin Gilbride and Buddy Ryan, when they were coaching with the Houston Oilers, got into fisticuffs on the sideline. And they had to be brought apart, but it was let go by the media right away, and it's still played on highlight reels today. Okay? If you ever look at an NBA coach on the sideline, you cannot run a live mic on him when he's chewing out a ref. Because he's using expletives in every other word. I mean, when you see him on highlight shows, they're putting a label over his mouth because you can read his lips and what he's saying. And this goes on all the time, but the media doesn't come back and say, well, they're arguing, they're fighting. That's acceptable. That's acceptable nature when a white man is cussing somebody out during a game.
Well, think about this guy who just got $100 million contract for, I think, going 57 and 55 in his last coaching stint, John Gruden with the Raiders. John Gruden with the Raiders, he was more known for cussing people out and cussing out the officials and using the blippity blip and the bleepity bleep and the expletive words and the four-letter words, and that's, hey, Gruden's really intense. Isn't he passionate? Now, these players down in Southern California last night, African-American athletes, and I don't know exactly who said what, but this is what's being reported, that they had some truculent words, some profanity being tossed. It was nowhere near the profanity-laced tirade that we've seen John Gruden do for the Raiders and the Buccaneers, okay? But because of that behavior, he's given a $100 million contract, and these black athletes, people are talking about suspending them for doing less than what John Gruden did. Big C, can you explain, if people can Google what Gruden used to do and say all the time, how can they say that these players behaved or less, I guess, insulting than what Gruden was, and he was doing that to officials and players? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, all you had to do was look no further than last night in Los Angeles between the game between the Rockets and the Clippers. Mike D'Antoni. I mean, half his conversation had to be beat out.
They beat all of it.
They killed him Mike several times on the sideline when he was officials here. He didn't get a technical foul.
He was saying we should overcome, Big C. Mike D'Antoni was saying we should overcome, Big C.
We gotta have equality. We can't have injustice on the court. We have to be fair in our officiating. That's the thing he was saying. I'm only asking you, I'm pleading my case. But every time they put a label over his mouth. But, you think about that, when a player goes to those expletives against an official, he's tough. And generally he's an African-American player. I mean, you killed him in Golden State. Green.
Draymond Green.
Because he's used these words on many occasions and got tossed from games, Charlie. And Mike D'Antoni put a course together. I mean, he could have done an album last night in the profanity that he used. I mean, he released a CD after the game. It was the number one profanity. and no one kicked him out of the game. But Blake Griffin gets kicked out of the game for using the profanity.
Yeah.
Dylan Ariza gets kicked out of the game for using the profanity. They were former teammates last year.
Yeah.
So there's no love lost between them. There's tension from guys that have parted ways. That's all it is.
Yeah, and
they've worked together and showered together before. But Mike D'Antoni was apoplectic last night and didn't get kicked from the game.
Yeah, I think Jerry Sloan was the same way when he coached the Utah Jazz, and people would pull that, they would pull that Karl Malone because he's a big physical guy, and oftentimes they're just advocating for their own players. Look, Steve Kerr for the Golden State Warriors, America's darling coach, he breaks a board, a playboard, whatever he had, on the side, a clipboard on the sideline, and people say, isn't he so intense? Doesn't he really show love for the game? They didn't say, well, he's being violent or vitriolic and we need to discipline him. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Bobby Knight. Bobby Knight was coaching college athletes, Charlton. Well, not grown men, college athletes.
Yeah, Bobby Knight, crazy.
There wasn't a night that he didn't use with my great grandmother. I wash your mouth out with soap, say something like that. Okay, he would eat a bucket of soap if he was with my great grandmother. In those days, Charlton. I mean, because she was serious about that. She made this homemade lye soap, and she would wash your mouth out with it. If you said one profanity word, you ate some soap.
That's funny.
I guess that's now called child abuse.
That's called child. Yeah, you'll be in trouble for that nowadays, Big Z.
Yeah, but it is to tell words that we use.
Yeah.
But when you look at these coaches, that they get a pass. On using profanity, berating players and officials. The players are grown men. They can't use the same words. And like we said, the NBA is 75% African American. So what you're doing is you're curtailing what the African Americans can say, Charles. You're limiting their script that they can spew out of their mouth.
Well,
we're going to put shackles on you. You're only allowed to say certain things. And if you cross this line, we kick you out of the game, which is going to cost you money. Oh, but your white coach can beat me down, and nothing will happen to him.
What was that back in the day with the New York Yankees? They won so many championships over the years, but
Billy Martin.
Billy Martin.
George Steinbrenner.
Now, I know that you've seen a lot. You know Billy Martin, and you knew him, how he would behave with players, and he was a great manager. No one can dispute that. But he gave it to you real. I mean, he was real talk. And when he got into a player's face, he was telling him how he felt. But he also had that same relationship with the guy who paid his paycheck in Steinbrenner, Big C. But he was still canonized as a great manager, Big C. I just think in our time, let's look at President Obama, former President Obama. If President Obama went around grabbing white women by the vagina, if he went around having 17 sexual assault lawsuits against white ladies, if he went around calling people, the blank country that they come from, if he behaved the way, if he said neo-Nazis were good, if he went around saying those things that Donald Trump has done, okay? If you take out
had his lawyer pay off 3 Playboy brothers for having an affair after he got married.
That's called good old boy behavior. But so imagine if President Obama had the same attitude with the media that Donald Trump has, especially with the sexual assault. Could you imagine how they would have slammed him, how they would have set to impeach him? And that's what Dr. King talked about, I have a dream we shall overcome. And even Donald Trump knows that President Obama could not have behaved that way and had the base support him as well as the national media. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Johnson, because that's how these people accept things.
It's
like Larry Nash, the former Olympic gymnast doctor who was sentenced today, Charlton.
Oh, really?
And he has over 200 women that accused him of sexual assault and misconduct.
Wow.
And 5 of them were Olympic gold medalists, Charlton.
Wow.
That he had done this to.
Wow.
5 Olympic gold medalists that he had sexually assaulted for years. Now, he's being sentenced, okay?
Yeah.
But Michigan State is getting a pass for having him on the payroll for 13 years.
And they knew about it.
Michigan State had him on the payroll for 13 years. And several of these accusations were made over 8 years ago to Michigan State.
Wow.
By some of these young ladies.
Yeah.
And they turned the blind eye on it. It was acceptable to them. So he's going to go to prison for 200 years.
Wow.
No one from Michigan State is losing their job. This is the same thing that happened at Penn State with Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno.
Yeah.
Everything that Michigan State had should be stripped from them.
Yeah.
Just like Penn State. This should be a university of shame. This is beyond culpable, Charlton, that they allow this man to be on the payroll for 13 years molesting these young girls.
Wow.
Holding technically a gun to the head. If you want to be in the Olympics, you got to shut your mouth. If you want to be on the U.S. team, you need to shut your mouth and deal with this. Assaulted some of these young girls over 200 times, Charlton.
Wow, that's a point that I didn't even think about that. I know how You look at SMU when they had that great football power down in Texas. It was Craig James and also Eric Dickerson in the backfield. And whatever the good old boys in Texas did to get good athletes, whether they were buying a new car.
Ron Meyer was the coach of that team.
Ron Meyer was the coach of that team. And so whether they were getting cars or they were getting women or their parents getting homes, the whole university, isn't it a shame the guys who did not participate in it are the ones who got punished too, along with the guys that benefited and went on to become millionaires? The guys who were second and third team players, they were also punished because that program got the death penalty. And that's a shame, Big C. That's analogous to someone drunk driving and the people in the passenger seat also go to jail. That doesn't make any sense. But I just thought about the fact that even Southern California with Reggie Bush, dating Kim Kardashian, you know how rich women buy guys things. And however money showed up, I don't even know. But I know under Pete Carroll, they were given probation and they had some issues to go through, losing scholarships. But when you just brought up what happened at Michigan State, I never thought about why won't they lose scholarships for all their athletic program. And maybe that's something people should look into, Big C. Your thoughts on that?
Charlton, Larry Nassar was the doctor for just the Olympic, the gymnastics.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
They have volleyball teams, they have basketball teams there, Charlton.
Yeah.
He was a female athletic doctor at Michigan State.
Wow.
So I'm going to think that all these sports crossed over to him: baseball, basketball, track and field, swimming, gymnastics.
Yep.
I think that everybody in Michigan State's administration needs to be fired and prosecuted, Charlton.
Yeah.
This is this is the culture of the White House right now.
Yeah.
Being a sexual predator is acceptable.
Yeah.
And this is what Larry Nassar did at Michigan State for over a decade to these young innocent girls.
Yeah.
And yet, rightfully so, he's going to prison. And maybe they'll put him in with some big guys that haven't seen a woman in a while.
Well, maybe.
And let him get treated nicely, okay?
And we know that happens. We know that happens, yeah.
Put him in a pink jumpsuit. Let him wear that every day so everybody knows who he is. But this is where administrators need to be held accountable. You just can't put it on NASA because they knew who this guy was. You going to tell me you don't run background checks on men that you put around young, innocent girls?
They do.
That are teenagers that are adolescents, Charlton?
Yeah.
You don't run background checks. Where was the person that was supposed to be in the room with you? You don't put a male doctor in with a female by himself. You don't. So there was an accomplice in this situation, Charlton.
Yeah.
And this stuff, and I'm gonna be honest, this stuff pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because I'm a dad and I have a daughter, and this pisses me off greatly.
Yeah.
That somebody would do that. Every time I would go to the doctor with my kids, Charlton, I would be there in the room, or the mother would be there in the room.
Yeah.
Okay? This is what they do. And even the doctors will tell you somebody needs to be in here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But we got these predators. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but aren't they all white, Charlton?
Well, it seems to be. You can Google that. I'll leave it at that, Big C. We can Google that because we know there's a white skin privilege, and that goes back to Dr. King and him having a dream about racial equality and how we're treated. And I think for the most part, and I think most black Americans can attest to this, we're more loved when we're big, strong, and physical and we play sports. If we're big, strong, and physical, we play sports, we're loved more by the society, especially when you have a uniform. Even with the uniform, they give you a number. So if you walk around with a number, you're praised. People want to say, hey, I love you. Hey, you're my favorite athlete. You're my hero. But what happens when you don't have a number? In the penitentiary, they give you numbers too. Okay, they give you numbers. Everybody has a number. Every athlete has a number. And people buy the jerseys, people buy the hats. But when you don't have that number on, then you go back to being treated like the mainstream society. I say that to bring up this point. I look at what happened in the NFL over the weekend. And people can like and not like whoever you like. That's your choice. We have coaches that get hired and fired. But before I get that point, I want to say that Coach Caldwell that was released by the Detroit Lions, would you believe that he had a record of 62-50? He's one of the rare coaches that won 14 games in the regular season, Big C, when he's with Indianapolis. He won 11 games twice with the Detroit Lions. He went 9-7 this year, and he gets fired. Now, he happens to be African American, and he has the right to get hired and fired. But there are coaches who don't even get to 900. John Gruden, his last time with the Raiders, he was 8-8. I just draw that contrast because when Gruden's being given $100 million, Caldwell's being kicked out. One guy went 8-8 twice, gets a job after he goes 57-55, and then another man who goes 62-50 gets fired. Now, I just want to know, the sports is about results, isn't it, Big C? That's what they tell us. Well, if you allegedly, right? So if you Google a guy that's 62 and 50 in his career, coaching career, and another guy that's 57 and 55, which one would you expect to get the job, and why doesn't? And that's why the Rooney Rule is so important, even though people laugh at it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Rooney Rule has become a total joke. It had good intentions when it was first laid out, Charlton. I think after they hired a couple African American coaches, they said, okay, now we got enough.
We got enough, yeah.
We got enough. We've letting too many in.
Yeah.
And ironically, they're getting positive results.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, Tomlin, Caldwell, the guy in San Diego, the name eludes me at the moment, but you know, in Denver, you know, you have an African American coach.
Yeah.
But these African American coaches, Charlton, you know, have won yet. I mean, in Cleveland, it hasn't turned out best for Hugh Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, we look in Cincinnati. He's had a couple down years, Lewis.
Yeah.
But Charlton, for the most part, when you look at African Americans with the Giants, I mean the Jets.
Yeah.
You know, Bowles had a down year this year, but everybody expected him not to win a game, yet he won 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But why is there such a backlash against African American coaches? Caldwell, I believe, had just as good, if not a better record than your kid in Dallas.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they were a 13-win team last year.
Yeah.
He had a better record than the coach in Houston.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, he had a better win record than 50% of the coaches in the NFL.
Can you?
Than 50% of the coaches in the NFL. If you're in the top half of your business, you're generally a success.
Yeah.
You know, you think about it. There were 16 coaches, I believe, Charlton. And what was it? It's 12 teams that make the playoffs, is it?
Yeah.
12 teams that make the playoffs. So there were only 12 coaches with at least as good or better record than Jim Caldwell in the NFL. Think about that statistic.
Yeah.
There were only 12 coaches with at least as good or better record than Jim Caldwell. So that meant, Charlton, that there were at least 19 coaches with a worse record than what he had.
Yep.
At least 19.
Well, you know,
and he's unemployed.
Something that I pulled up, and I was just listening to guys talk, because I listen to people and talk to people all over the country about their thoughts on things, and we all can be money quarterbacks. But I hear that there's so much rumor, and Mike Tomlin, who's the third active winningest coach in the NFL, only after Belichick and Andy Reid. And Andy Reid can't win a playoff game. And at least, you know, Tomlin won his first game. But I gotta bring this point up, Big C. He's won a Super Bowl, okay? Andy Reid's never won a Super Bowl. But there are people saying that Tomlin needs to lose his job for winning the AFC North and going 10-3 on the regular season, and then having a defense that's banged up and losing a game to a team that happens to be in the AFC Championship game. Not to a team that went, you know, had 3 wins on the season or 4 wins, but people want him to lose his job because he lost to a team that's beaten them 5 out of 6 times. If you look at the history, Cowher also lost to Jacksonville, okay? Jacksonville's better than people give him credit. But who calls for firing a coach that goes 13-3, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you think about it. 10 years ago, Charlton, Cowher lost to him twice in the same season at home. 10 years ago.
I know that.
And so no one called for Cowher to be fired because he lost to Jacksonville twice in the same season. But now they're calling for him to lose his job because he lost to him twice in the same season, Charlton.
Yeah.
And he's the only coach that people are calling for that.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we talked about earlier with Caldwell, we know that there's at least 20 coaches with a worse record than what he has.
Yeah.
Okay? At least 20 coaches.
And you can Google that. Yeah, you can Google that too. So,
no one's saying they need to fire him, they need to fire him. They're not going up and down the list saying that these guys need to be fired.
No.
No one is calling for Sean Payton to be fired today.
No.
Okay?
No.
After that dramatic loss to the Vikings.
Yeah.
No one's saying that he should be fired. Nobody's calling for the guy in Atlanta
to
be fired.
No.
After that loss to the Eagles. And Charlton, let me
Dan Quinn,
they tried to run the same play that the San Francisco 49ers ran in 1982 to beat the Dallas Cowboys. That was the identical play with that roll right with Montana trying to throw it back to Dwight when he threw it to
Dwight Clark,
Jones, but He wanted to throw the ball to Sanu. Sanu got double covered on the play. He thought they would double up on Jones.
Yeah.
But they doubled up on Sanu.
Yeah.
So somebody was reading history just like I was. and seeing that same thing.
Yeah.
This is the same damn play the 49ers ran.
You know?
And all of a sudden they ran that same play.
Yeah.
Matt Ryan panicked, threw the ball to the receiver, overthrew it.
Yeah. Yep. And if he caught it, he would have been out of bounds anyway. But it did show. And Julio didn't hold on to the ball. That's how Jerry Rice would have held on to it. But it goes back to what we talked about for so many times, Big C. And again, the thing I love about sports is you do it on the field. You do it live, just like the Big C Sports Show. There's no teleprompter. There's no written down script. You just speak extemporaneously, and you speak from your higher self. You either know it or you don't. But what I love about the sports business, and no one can say that this stuff, it doesn't have people putting it on the line. Just like the game you talked about with Philadelphia and Atlanta. The only people, I listened to a player from Philadelphia talk today, and he said, you know what, we don't care what people think. The people that are playing on this team that have our uniforms, we care what they think. Everybody else, we don't care what they think. The players always get to decide it. You know, give or take a referee making a call or not making a call. But isn't that one of the greatest things about sports in the universe is that the players get to decide for the most part? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, Charlie, we talked about that prior to that game, that Matt Ryan would be Matt Ryan when they got outside in the cold.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
He would panic, and he did that. Here it is, everybody said Nick Foles didn't deserve to be there. Nick Foles lit the field on fire in the second half, okay?
He won.
He lit it on fire in the second half, and he outdueled Matt Ryan, a $25 million quarterback.
Yeah.
Nick Foles outdueled him. Matt Ryan has showed consistently, yes, the Falcons went to the Super Bowl last year, but he has shown consistently and throughout his pro career is that he is not a big game second half quarterback. When the game is on the line, don't count on him.
Yeah.
Because he gets Mr. Happy Feet. And I saw that Disney movie a couple times, Happy Feet.
That's a good movie.
Okay? And that's him.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about panic. And even Sarkisian said that when we rolled him out because he tends to panic when people get around his feet. Now think about this.
Yeah.
You make $25 million a year and you panicking not to take a hit?
Yeah.
And your running back, your top running back, Freeman, he has a 4-year contract that only pays him $24 million. You make as much money in 1 year as Freeman makes in 4 years, and he gets hit every time he touches the ball, and you scared?
Yeah, you're in
the wrong business.
You think about this, too, with Atlanta. Coleman had 10 carries for 79 yards. Now, if my math is right, that's almost 8 yards a pop. So why is he only touching the ball 10 times to be averaging 8 yards a carry, Big C? Can someone please explain that to me? I'm not good at math, but I know if you get 80 yards on 10 carries, that's about 8 yards. Do they know that he only touched the ball 8 times or 10 times in that game, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, one of the things that I've learned in the last 2 big games that Atlanta's been in, you know, they don't have any coaches up in the booth in the second half. Everybody comes down to the sideline with Arthur Blank to own it. Everybody stands around Arthur trying to keep him warm. Because I recall last year in the Super Bowl when Freeman was chewing up, you know, the Patriots. And he only touched the ball twice in the second half. And you just pointed this out about Coleman. And I saw Arthur on the sideline again in the second half of this game, freezing. You know, red cheeks and all. I didn't know if he was, had on a jersey on his face or not. But here it is. You got a guy got 80 yards on 10 carries. And we said we got a quarterback, and you got an offensive coordinator say, I got a quarterback that's scared when people get around his legs. Okay? So I'm not going to get the ball to the running back. I'm going to let him get scared. And he's going to get sacked. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to throw fumbles. Okay? And he's going to overthrow receivers. Because he's scared. You got an offensive coordinator saying that his quarterback is scared.
And you think about it. Most running backs, they don't get going until they touch the ball about 15 to 20 times. We talked about when Gurley played in the playoff game down in Los Angeles against Atlanta. I think he only touched the ball like 14 times, and he still had 100 yards on 14 carries. And you wonder, with all this money they want to give players like our coaches, why doesn't someone recognize math? If I get think about the days that Jim Brown played. I'm not saying they're as good as Jim Brown, but could you imagine Jim Brown running the football only 10 times in a championship game or trying to get to a championship game? They would ask for the firing of that coach, Big C. Jim Brown, you knew he needed to run the ball because his numbers backed it up. There's something about results that, you know, the results matter. If you have a running back, and we can even watch it in this weekend, anyone that's averaging 8 yards a carry, and my math is a little bit shaky sometimes, but I think that's a first down every 2 times he touches the ball, Big C. That would take them out of having to throw the ball downfield for a touchdown with one, in the fourth quarter, Big C. That make any sense?
Well, Charlton, that's ball control, and you got a tired defense.
Yeah.
That's what they create. You got leverage against the defense. And now all of a sudden you're figuring, because I got this high-profile quarterback who's the name of our franchise.
Yep.
And he's the one to take us to the promised land.
Yeah.
And we've seen this more often than not when teams lose, Charlton.
Yeah.
Is that you don't want to get the ball to somebody else who may get the spotlight.
Yeah.
And this is what has happened in back-to-back big games for the Falcons.
Yeah.
We had 2 Super Bowl MVPs in the making. But Matt Ryan wanted that to culminate his NFC Championship MVP, okay? That's what he wanted. He didn't care about the team winning. He wanted a Super Bowl MVP trophy. He needed to hang that in his trophy case.
Let me ask you.
Other than put the ring on his finger.
I want to bring this up to you, but first I want to say that sports is a $1 billion industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this $1 billion industry. For every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports, and whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, even your mom and pop soccer leagues, when you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. Call 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. I want to bring it to a point, and I know you probably might disagree with me when I bring up this point, Big C, because you're a defensive guy. You know you guys hold a lot, right? But Jalen Ramsey reminds me so much of Deion Sanders in the way that he's a shutdown cornerback. Here's a guy that doesn't need help with double team. He doesn't need his linebackers blitzing. He says, put me on that best guy. And he balls out every play. Now, here's a player that says, and I love his speech, Big C, because he says, not only are we going to the Super Bowl, we're going to win the bleep, 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 right? We're going to win that bleep, bleep, bleep. I love the swagger of that. Now, there are people saying, well, he shouldn't say that because he's giving them ammunition. If you're not motivated to play the championship game, you don't need to be playing the game anyway. I like what he said, Big C. I like that he called out his own players, and I like that he put the target on New England and saying, look, we're coming to win. We're not coming there hoping that we can say, hey, good game, Tom Brady. We're coming to win. I like that swagger, Big C. Is that a good or bad thing for a team? Your thoughts?
Charlton, I never showed up at a game, even though when I was an underdog, expecting to lose.
Yeah.
I walked into the game with enough confidence in myself saying, I don't care what the rest of the team doing, but the guy across me going to have a bad day. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. The guy across from me, the other 10 guys on the field, I don't know what their thoughts were. But when I went to work, I knew at least one guy was going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
For 60 minutes, he was going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And so I'm just hoping that the rest of my teammates have that mindset.
Yeah.
That those other 10 guys are going to have bad days that they're looking at.
Yeah.
And if you don't go into a game with that thought process, whether it's a basketball, baseball, football, tennis, you think Rafa Nadal goes down tonight in the Australian Open saying, well, I hope I can compete, and I'm ranked number 1. I hope I can compete, and this guy doesn't give me too hard of a match. Rafa walks in there, left-handed Spaniard, said, hey, this, I don't want you to take this serious, but I get this type of butt whooping to everybody, okay? This is how it is. And, I mean, I go back to the movie Harlem Nights with the late Richard Pryor, Fred Sanford,
I think Eddie Murphy was in there,
Della
Reese.
And there was a boxing heavyweight champion who studied. And there was a cop in there that made fun of him all the time. The champ, And he walked into the ring. And he was fighting this white opponent. And this is the only time in the movie he didn't stammer. And he said, I don't want you to take this excellent butt whipping personally, okay? He didn't use the B word, he used the A word. But I don't want you to take this personally, because I'm about to knock your A out, okay? This is what he said. But that's his business. He wasn't going in there, let's have a good fight, man, let's have a good... He just told him, I don't want you to take this butt whipping personally. So I do this to everybody.
And that's real talk, because if you look at an athlete's swagger, Deion Sanders had that. I look at, Dick Butkus had that. That good old boy from the Mike Singletary had that with the Bears. Lawrence Taylor had that.
Jack Lambert had the Steelers chalk.
Yeah,
he had that nasty mentality at middle life. He had no teeth, looked like a vampire, and he walk out there and he tell everybody, you know, this ain't personal. This is what I'm gonna do to you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you before the game what I'm gonna do to you. I'm gonna relate you. I'm gonna eat your kids if you got some. Ain't nothing to say. You need to lock people up because it's gonna be an X-rated game.
Hey,
okay.
That is
as an athlete, as a true heart. You tell me LeBron don't go onto the court, even though they lost last night. You look at his statistics. He went out there to win the game. He didn't care what Golden State had. He figured as a team. We might be outmanned, but I'm not outmanned as an individual.
He's going to get
my guy that's covering me not going to have a good night. Okay, defensively.
So when you think about a guy like Ramsey, he's doing what Ali did that. You know, Mike Tyson told guys whatever he told them. They talk like D'Antoni was talking last night for the Houston Big C down and playing the Clippers. They all have that swagger, and I know a lot of people say, "Oh, they shouldn't say that." George Foreman.
When George Foreman was in his heyday. And Richard Pryor, we keep talking about Richard Pryor, but Richard was so great. And he resonates in your mind every day. Anytime you want to talk something that's funny. George Foreman used to get into the ring and say, "Which one the referee?" Because I'm knocking that other MF out. Okay, that's all it was. Which one the referee? Because the other was getting knocked out. And he didn't go out there to touch gloves. He went out there to put the glove on your forehead. I mean, he was tenacious. The late Muhammad Ali was tenacious in his heyday. It's like, this is going to be a tough night for you. And I'll tell you when I'm going to put your butt down on the campus.
So
he told you when you were going down.
They love the talk, and they backed it up. Big C, that's what we love about some of the great athletes. Want to get your thoughts real quick. When I look at Jacksonville, I think a key for them is Fournette ran the ball 25 times, 109 yards. Okay? Le'Veon Bell for the Steelers, 16 carries, 67 yards. Maybe couldn't run it more. But I look at, Blake Bortles, 14 of 26, 214. Not a bad game, but they gave up a lot of points too. But not a bad game. He didn't make the mistakes when he could have easily made mistakes down the stretch, especially when they kept scoring. Big Ben.
That game was predicated on Pittsburgh's offense. Look at the turnovers that Ben had in this game. Look at the turnovers that Ben had in the first game. Ben cannot figure out this Jacksonville defense. You think about it. You have 5 touchdown passes in a game. You pass for 440 yards and you lose. But your defense did not give up as many points as your offense scored. Think about that. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns, Jacksonville did. You take those off the board. You take the last one off the board.
And the Steelers win that game.
But, here it is. The coach is getting maligned because of mistakes that the quarterback is making. No one is saying the quarterback needs to be cut, needs to be fired. They're saying that Tomlin needs to go because Ben gave up 2 touchdowns.
Ben
gave up 2 touchdowns, not Tomlin. Ben did.
And another thing in that game, too, they were saying on the onside kick, there's no need to onside kick. They have 2 timeouts, and they have about 2 minutes left in the game. Give your defense a chance to stop them. If they looked at the scoreboard, the defense had to stop Jacksonville for 45 points. So Tomlin said, this is the only chance we have. They're marching up and down the field like a rat goes through a cheese factory, and they couldn't stop them good old boys, Big C. So he thought at least let's get the onside kick and give ourselves a chance, because he saw that they weren't stopping them from getting first downs and going up and down the field. And he's being criticized for that.
Help me understand this. Why in the hell you have an onside kick in football anyway?
Because you get the ball back.
All the time. You have an onside kick with the hopes that your kicking team will have 2 out of 10 times recover that onside kick. Now, when you kick off a football, there's 3 things that can happen when you kick off a football, Charlton. The ball can be fumbled, you get a penalty, it can be returned all the way. Those are the 3 things that can happen. So you can recover that ball at 10 yards from the kick, or you can try to recover it 50 yards from the kick. All right? Which is a fumble. But if that guy breaks coverage and takes it back, what if he runs it back to where they recovered it on the onside kick? There's no guarantee that he won't take it back that far. But everything that Tomlin does is questioned. Nothing that Ben did was questioned. He threw for 440 yards and 5 touchdowns. But how many fumbles and interceptions did he have?
Tomlin did not throw Big Ben under the bus the way the media wants to throw Tomlin under the bus. Had he told the truth, he could say, Ben threw the interception and also the fumble was a return for a touchdown. You got to protect the ball. I want to bring this point up before we go to one more thought, Big C. when I look at Seattle and how they beat Green Bay in the NFC Championship game a couple years ago, they also had an onside kick. I'll never forget, the broadcasters were saying they need to kick the ball deep and let their defense come on and stop them. But they kicked the onside kick and they recovered it, and Wilson hit one of his receivers in the post pattern for a touchdown, and they won that game. And I believe it was an overtime game against Green Bay. And, of course, they won into the Super Bowl, and Pete Carroll was the greatest coach in the history of the universe. So with coaches come and go, but sometimes they're a little bit too hard on the guy. Just Google the record of guys you want to fire. I could say anyone who goes 8-8 like Gruden did twice at the Raiders, yeah, maybe they should be fired because that's not getting you into the playoffs. But when you go 13-3, you don't need to talk about firing that guy. You need to talk about getting some stickum on the quarterback's hands so he can hold on to the ball when he's sacked. I want to bring you a little bit, Big C, to something that's happening, and we'll get more into it in the game coming up. The Vikings. I've wanted to get your thoughts on the Vikings. I know Al Michaels, when the USA beat Russia in the hockey game back in the day, he said, "Do you believe in miracles?" Well, actually, the U.S. went on to win, okay? Was that a miracle play? How else can you define that? That makes me feel like I was a little boy in the backyard playing, catching the winning touchdown pass, and every kid has played through that at least 1,000 times playing in the backyard, Big C. What went through your mind when you saw that play? And you think about it. When Diggs comes down, he didn't know he was going to get tackled or not, but he was prepared to spin and avoid the tackle and run to the end zone. What were you thinking when you saw that play, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when I saw that play, Charlie, it took me back to the 70s. Dallas Cowboys versus the Minnesota Vikings, the NFC Championship game in Metropolitan Stadium.
Yep.
Drew Pearson against Nate Wright, defensive back number 43 for the Minnesota Vikings. Drew Pearson, all-time great Dallas Cowboy receiver number 88. Roger Staubach threw one up the same sideline, the right sideline. All of a sudden, they got close. Nate Wright went down. Drew Pearson's hand came back to his body and caught the ball, turned around, and scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
I thought deja vu. The Vikings have gotten redemption for something that happened 40 years ago.
Yeah.
To them at Metropolitan Stadium outside in the cold. And what's more fitting? Because Bud Grant was in the stands.
Isn't that amazing? Yep.
Bud Grant remembers that play, and I tell you, Bud Grant had the same flashback. He said, that's the same thing that happened to me over 40 years ago. That cost me a Super Bowl. The Purple People leaders. They talked about that defensive group, and they talked about them during the game, and the Vikings had one that emulates the Purple People leaders from the 70s.
Yeah.
But that, Charlton, brought me back to a play that happened when Drew Pearson caught the ball, and the Cowboys went on to go to the Super Bowl to beat the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
But that same play had happened to the Vikings over 40 years ago. And all I could think about was deja vu redemption. I didn't think about the kid missing the tackle.
Yeah.
People miss tackles all the time in the NFL. Maybe not in that big a fashion.
Yeah.
But they miss tackles all the time. And everybody that's sitting in the box is questioning the kid's tactics, okay? The coverage was put there. He had his hand down.
Yeah.
But what if they taught players nowadays? If he hits the guy too early,
field
goal range, pass interference.
Yep.
Okay? If he misses, anything can happen. All he wanted to do was have the guy catch the ball. That's what he was told.
Yeah.
He was told by the coaching staff, let him catch the ball.
Yeah.
So that's what he was doing. He was letting him catch the ball. Did he take a bad angle? Yes, he did.
Yeah.
But, it's good to be lucky, and it's lucky to be good sometimes, all right?
That sounds like Jackie Gleason, like when he told his son and Smokey the Bandit, he said, there's no way you could have come from my loins. And I think about how funny Jackie Gleason was, and you think about the emotions of Minnesota. Number one, the crowd was amazing, so electrifying. To go from being sad at one moment, thinking, okay, our season's over, this has happened again, as you just brought up the great catch that Drew Pearson made back in the day. And then just about one play later, and now they're having a chance to celebrate that win and go into the NFC Championship game. I'm just thinking of the people in Minnesota. They've been through so much, Big C. There's a couple seasons ago when Seattle was up there and they were playing at the University of Minnesota.
Missed
the field goal in like single degree temperature. That's another time they had their hearts ripped out. Brett Favre down in the Dome in New Orleans. When they could have been perhaps in field goal range, they had him scramble and he tried to throw to get a little bit closer, and the ball was intercepted. Across the grain. And it was intercepted. Minnesota had to have another fate. We know they've been to 4 Super Bowls. They're 0-4 in those Super Bowls. Big C, just give me your thoughts on the guys like Alan Page, when he played back in the day, they had Chuck Foreman, the running back, and Fran Tarkenton, all the great players, Carl Eller, so many great Minnesota Vikings. They must love this moment, Big C, because they've been in that moment when it didn't come out on their side. Big C, your thoughts?
Ron Neary, offensive tackle, Mick Tingle off the center. Jeff Siemens, middle linebacker, talking great players from those eras. Nate Wright, the defensive back that we spoke about. Carl Kosaki, all-time NFL touch interception leader when he retired at safety. This is a team talking that mirrors them in so much. They're the only team in the NFL with two white safeties, just like they had when they had the purple people leaders.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't understand the mirroring of this team that they had back in that era with Bud Grant.
Yeah.
You had a quarterback that didn't have a great, strong arm.
Yeah.
When you look at Case Keenum, the Vikings didn't have all-pro quarterbacks back then.
No.
They didn't even have all-pro running backs. Chuck Foreman wasn't an all-pro running back.
No.
Chuck Brown wasn't an all-pro running back that they had. It was a different Jim Brown than the other one that played in Cleveland.
Yeah.
But they had receivers. Gene Washington, was one of the primary receivers back in those days.
Yeah.
Stu Voigt was their tight end. This is a team, Charlton, that's built a lot physically like the team they had in those days, Charlton.
Yep.
They were a pounded-out football team. They weren't a great speed team. They had receivers that nobody knew about. They had a quarterback that was a game manager.
Yeah.
That's all they had. But this was a hard-fought team. And that's what you saw. You saw no quit in this team. I mean, everybody beat up on Case Keenum all year long.
Yeah.
They still beat up on him in this game.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't have his best game of the season in this game, but Charlton, he did enough when it counted to win. He had a critical turnover late in the game.
Yep.
That everybody thought that this is cost the game. This is what you would expect from a guy who's never been there. But they never said that on the last play of the game. This is what you expect from a guy who's never been there. They didn't say the same thing about Case Keenum, and they didn't say the same thing about Nick Foles, who were both teammates 2 years ago, last year with the Rams, Charlton. Think about this. The two quarterbacks opposing each other in the NFC Championship game this week were teammates last year with the Rams.
Isn't that something?
Jeff Fisher got to think proudly of himself, even though he got fired for not being a good coach.
Yeah.
He had 3 quarterbacks in the playoffs this year, Charlton.
Yeah.
3. And he has 2 of them in the NFC Championship. He's going to have 1 of them in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But all of these guys were with one organization last year, Goff.
Yeah.
Keenum and Foles.
Yeah.
But, Charlton, this is the first time since I think, who was the guy, Jake Delhomme?
Yeah, Jake Delhomme.
And I'm trying to remember the other quarterback, Hasselbeck.
Yeah.
First time that you had quarterbacks that were drafted after the 3rd round playing only second time in NFL history.
Yeah.
Playing an NFC Championship game, Charlton.
Yeah, that's
you think about that. So it's opportunity when preparation meets opportunity. And so when your buddy Mel Kiper talks about franchise quarterbacks, can't miss prospects, and Donald out there at SC,
Sam Donald,
a franchise quarterback.
No, he's not yet.
Think about how many franchise quarterbacks, Charlton, are playing this weekend. Okay.
Yeah.
Think about that. There are 4 quarterbacks left playing this weekend.
Yeah.
How many of those were franchise quarterbacks when they got drafted? Only one was thought of as a franchise. Not even one.
Brady wasn't either.
They said Blake Bortles was, but he wasn't a franchise quarterback. He was just drafted.
Yeah.
But the quarterbacks drafted this weekend, of the 3 top ones, Brady, a 6th-round draft pick.
Yep.
You look at Keenum, wasn't even drafted. Foles, was a 3rd-round draft pick?
Yeah.
So when you think about that, and all these experts out there who are breaking down the games this week, who are doing all their analysis and doing all their their algorithms and all this stuff, out there breaking down the game, why this and that will happen.
Yeah.
Go back to where you were the day that these guys are drafted or not drafted.
Yeah.
And tell us how your expertise pans out now.
Well, I tell you.
That you knew this guy would be who he was. And I want every one of them to stand up and tell that lie this week.
Yep.
Because they still been saying that about Tom Brady. Who knew?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep, that's
7
true.
Super Bowl appearances later. Who knew?
That's
6th-round draft pick that everybody talk about shouldn't even make the team.
Yep.
Keenum.
Yeah.
The journeyman. Okay?
Yeah. Well,
Nick Foles, a transfer from Michigan State to Arizona to a 3rd-round draft pick.
Yeah.
Now the NFC Championship.
I tell you what, Big C, there's something about sports. You get to earn it on the field, and that's what I love about pro sports. You don't get seeded into the playoffs. You got to earn your way into the playoffs, and that's what I love about watching NFL football. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bondini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you've got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, what I'm looking forward to is all these prognosticators over the week to come, Charlton, to tell me what they knew and why they knew it, and still of the bashing the players who didn't make the play. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose,
Yep.
and that's going to happen in every sporting event that we see.
Yeah.
There are no ties in this time of the season, Charlton. You may have some in the regular season, but there won't be any ties this time of the season.
Well, yeah.
So for the last month, Charlton, I've seen some of the greatest football that's ever been played on the collegiate and professional level.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to send my greatest thanks out to all those tremendous athletes and even those coaches who participated in those events and brought joy to the homes of Americans, Charlton.
That's a very good point, Big C, and we all appreciate it, especially on the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday weekend. And everyone, hope you have a great time watching football this weekend coming up. And you can always follow us every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say there's never, ever any excuse to ever put your hands on a woman. No woman should ever have to go through that garbage. If you know any woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no woman should ever have to go through that on her own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.